Hello, friends, and welcome. It is that time of year already, that bittersweet time where you're saying goodbye to all the vibrant veggies and fruits coming out of the garden and welcoming a slower pace of life. The homemaker in me is actually quite relieved. I have a lot going on in this season of life, homeschooling, newborn phase, all of those wonderful things. So I'm looking forward to slowing down just a little bit. I have a small fall garden going, just of various cabbages and lettuces, kale, kohlrabi, broccoli, and those sorts of things. But for the most part, I have turned the summer garden over to the chickens now. The chickens are going to help me break all of this down, all of the dying foliage and brown stems and all of those things will be scratched into the dirt. Their fresh manure will be inoculating these garden beds that have provided us an abundant amount of produce this summer. The chickens are going to tackle the hardest part for me to go ahead and get these beds to rest. Of course, we still have some things going on. First and foremost being the peppers. We are in zone 7B, so I still have a fair amount of peppers to be picking through and preserving. And right now, I really want to try and take some of these hot peppers and banana peppers that I have still and ferment them. I have already frozen a lot of bell peppers, so right now I'm focusing mainly on eating them fresh for dinner and just trying to get some to boost our immune systems for the fall season to come, and I do that by fermenting them. So if you've never fermented peppers, let me show you how to do it. I've got about 1.5 pounds of a mix of peppers. I like to do a mix of spicy and mild peppers. So banana peppers and hot peppers together are a great variation in my opinion. Make sure they're nice and firm, that they're not all wilted. You want to have the freshest peppers possible. If you are buying them from the store, try and make them organic so that you have better success with fermentation. You want all of that natural bacteria on the peppers. So I just give them a quick rinse. Recommend you wear some gloves for this depending on how spicy your peppers are. It's worth noting as well that you don't want to use a super spicy pepper like a ghost pepper or a Carolina Reaper because the chemical in them almost kind of acts like an antibacterial and it can hinder the fermentation process. So if you are using a really spicy pepper, just keep that in mind. You might want to add a more mild pepper into the mix. So I like this mix and I'm just going to slice them into chunks. You can slice them and dice them however you wish. I like to put them into chunks, that way I can kind of mash it down a little bit better into the jar. If you have about 1 to 2 pounds of peppers, that's about a 32-ounce mason jar size, and that's what I prefer, especially since I have these fermentation weights and lids that are specifically designed for the 32-ounce wide mouth mason jar. I will link that in the description box below so you know what I'm talking about. It's wonderful, especially if you're new to preserving. So once you've got all your peppers cut up, go ahead and put them into your mason jar or whatever jar that you're going to be using. You just want to make sure that it's kind of airtight. You're not letting it sit out in the open air or anything like that. We want to minimize how much air we have in our jar as much as possible. So fill the jar up and try and pack them in as best as you can. Once your jar is full, go ahead and fill it to the brim with water. Keep in mind, some of this is going to be spilling out in the later step. It's not a big deal. Just fill it as much as you can to completely submerge all of the peppers. Then you're going to break out your scale. A scale is really helpful here. For peppers, we want about 3 or 4% salt concentration per weight. So I'd measure out by grams here to measure out how much salt we have. So I'm going to take an empty jar. It's the same exact jar. I'm just going to zero out my scale so I'm not counting the weight of the jar. And in this way, I get the weight of the water and the peppers combined. And I take that weight, it was about 850 grams, and I multiply that by 4%. That's the percent salt I'm going. You can go anywhere from 3% up to about 8% salt, depending on what you want. If you want saltier brine or a less salty brine. So I've got to add about 34 grams of Himalayan salt is what I'm using today. And I'm just going to add it straight to the jar. I'm going to put the regular mason jar lid on it, and I'm going to vigorously shake that up so all of the salt gets nice and combined. All right, so I'm just going to take off the regular mason jar lid, and this is where a bowl is going to be handy. Grab yourself a bowl because we're going to start packing these peppers down with our weight. So the kit that I got for the fermentation actually came with this tamper to go ahead and make my life a little bit easier so I don't have to use my hands or anything, but just pack your peppers down as much as you can, release as many of those air bubbles as possible. You want everything submerged in water. You don't want a bunch of air bubbles. And you can also scoop out the seeds as well. Once you see the seeds start floating to the top, you can just grab a spoon and kind of scoop those out. I have not had an issue with seeds floating to the top and causing mold or anything like that, so don't worry about being perfect here. Leave about a 1-inch headspace from the brine to the top of the jar just to allow for any liquid that is going to be rising up as it bubbles. You also want to make sure you're burping this every other day or so for the first week as it starts the fermentation process. I have one of these lids that allows the air to kind of get released on its own slowly. That's another benefit of using these lids, is that I don't have to burp the jars myself. So that makes the process so much easier. Keep these in a dark, cool place for anywhere for 4 to 5 weeks, depending on your preference of flavor. After which you can put in the refrigerator and it will stay good for up to 6 months. Just keep in mind that beneficial bacteria tend to dwindle the longer it sits in the fridge. This is a batch I made about 4 weeks ago, so I just wanted to show you what this yeast looks like, because you might see, especially if you're using a sweeter pepper, this yeast, and it is not mold, it is not bad. Please do not throw it away. It's just from the natural sugars. It smells wonderful, you guys. This is such a healthy addition to the diet and a wonderful way to use up the last of those peppers in the garden. I hope you guys try this one out. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time.